In today's episode, I'm sharing 12 true, disturbing stories about creepy Appalachian encounters. These stories come straight from the deep woods, where the map ends and something else begins. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. Don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. I'd also love to hear where you're listening from. Thank you all for your support. It means a lot to me. Now let's start. That summer, my cousin Lark and I got into this unspoken competition. Late night drives to nowhere, sketchy house parties, gas station dinners. But that trip we took into the Blue Ridge backcountry, that was the one that stuck. Not just because it was stupid, it was, but because I still can't explain what happened out there. She'd just gotten her license reinstated, finally, after months of court stuff and the long fallout from a messy breakup that kinda gutted her. I think part of her needed to feel capable again, like she could survive something hard and still come out with her head up. And honestly, I just needed a break from Charleston. I was sick of campus, sick of traffic, sick of hearing my roommates argue about dishes. We didn't put much planning into it, which now seems insane. We found this old paper map her dad had buried in a drawer. Probably hadn't been updated since the 80s, and he'd marked this loop trail right near the Carolina-Georgia line. Said he'd hiked it in college. It ran through some old coal land, mostly overgrown and off-grid. No phone reception, no ranger station. But the way he talked about it made it sound like the perfect place to disappear for a couple of days. We left around 9 in the morning and hit the end of the road by noon. And I do mean the end. The road just kind of gave up halfway up a ridge, like it got tired of pretending to be useful. We parked next to this busted-looking sedan that had clearly been there for a while. The windows were clouded with grime, and it didn't have any plates, just this faint outline where they used to be. The tires had sunk a little into the gravel. I pointed it out and said, "That's sketchy," but Lark just shrugged. "Probably hunters," she said. We climbed over a rusted gate that barely hung on its hinges and started walking. Right away, the heat smacked us. It was thick, humid, and didn't let up. Within minutes, my shirt was sticking to my back and my legs felt like I'd wrapped them in wet towels. The trail was faint, barely more than a suggestion, cutting through dense brush that seemed way too tall for late summer. We followed the northern fork, heading toward what used to be a creek bed. Dry now. Just packed dirt and pale rocks scattered like someone had dropped a puzzle and lost interest halfway through. No signs, no markers. Just this narrow track that curled around a ridgeline and dipped into a dark patch of trees where the canopy swallowed most of the light. Everything got quieter the deeper we went. First the birds stopped, then the bugs. Then even our footfalls seemed too loud. That silence, it wasn't peaceful. It felt staged, like something had paused the forest. You don't realize how much background noise there usually is until it's gone. I said, "You feel that? Like something's off?" Lark didn't say anything. She just slowed down, scanned the trees behind us for a long second, and then picked up the pace. That was the first time I felt actual tension from her. And she's usually the one laughing at danger. Then we heard it. Behind us, one set of footsteps. Just one. Crunch, drag, stop. We both stopped walking. I turned, expecting to see someone else on the trail, maybe a solo hiker who'd followed us in. But there was no one. Just empty woods and the way we came, stretching back in absolute silence. We waited. Nothing moved. No wind, no birds, not even a branch swaying. It felt like the whole forest had turned into a photograph. We started walking again, slower this time. I counted steps in my head. 1, 2, 10. Then again, behind us, crunch, drag, stop, closer, heavier. It didn't sound like someone trying to sneak up on us. It sounded like they didn't care if we heard. I whispered, "Someone's following us." Lark gave me this quick look, tense, jaw tight, and nodded. She didn't even pretend to brush it off. The trail curved uphill, and on the left side there was this ridge with a collapsed shelter leaning sideways against a chunk of rock. It looked like one of those old-school Appalachian shelters from decades ago, the kind that were more wood than function. The roof had caved in on one side, but part of it still stood. A thick rope hung from a bolt embedded in the rock wall, dirty and stiff, but still holding. I pointed up and said, "We're going up now." Lark didn't argue. We scrambled for the rope and climbed. The rock was rough, and my boots slipped once near the top, but we made it. Once we were up there, crouched behind what was left of the shelter, we had a clear view of the trail. I was still catching my breath when Lark suddenly stiffened. She didn't speak, just stared. A man had stepped out from the trees, maybe 20 feet behind where we'd just been. He wasn't dressed for hiking, just jeans, scuffed boots, and a tan jacket zipped halfway. No pack, no gear. Nothing about him said, "I belong here." He looked like someone who'd wandered out of a DMB line and into the forest by mistake, but it wasn't just that. It was the way he moved. Or didn't. He didn't call out. Didn't seem confused. He just stood there, head slightly tilted, eyes locked on where we were, like he'd known exactly where we'd gone. I called down, "We don't want any trouble. We're just hiking through." No reaction. Nothing. Not even a blink. Then, without breaking eye contact, he started walking toward the rock. Slow steps. Intentional. Not rushed. He reached the base, looked up, and put one hand on the rope. Just held it. I grabbed a piece of broken shale near my foot. It had a jagged edge and a bit of heft. "Lark," I said quietly, "grab something solid. If he climbs, we don't let him get up here." She moved fast, found 2 rocks near the collapsed roof and brought them over. We crouched, weapons in hand, waiting. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared. Then, after what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than a minute, he blinked, let go of the rope, and stepped back. Not like someone giving up, more like someone backing into a lake. Calm, unblinking. He vanished into the trees without a sound. We waited. 20 minutes, maybe more. Still nothing. No sounds, no animals, no wind. Then we heard a crack. One clean branch snapping off to our left. "That was enough," I whispered. "We're going. You first." Lark didn't argue. She eased down the rope, landed light, and turned to keep watch while I followed. My legs felt like concrete, but I didn't let them slow me. Once we were both on the ground, we moved. No talking, just steady steps, ears sharp, eyes scanning the shadows. Then, slowly, the forest started coming back to life. A buzz of a mosquito, a rustle in the leaves. Then, bird song. As if whatever had paused, everything decided it was over. By the time we reached the truck, everything sounded normal. But too normal, like someone hit play on a sound machine. We checked everything, opened the cab, looked under the bed. Nothing, no signs of anyone. Before getting in, I turned and looked back at the trail. I thought I saw movement. Something just past the tree line, but it could have been wind. Or it could have been him, still watching. We drove out in total silence. Didn't speak until we hit signal again, somewhere near Fairmore. I tried pulling up the trailhead on my phone. Nothing. The road we took didn't even show up. That was the last time I ever went hiking without telling someone exactly where I was going. The pickup location was way out in the Virginia Appalachians, past the usual hiking spots, beyond the dirt roads people still name after their uncles. The job wasn't labeled, just a set of coordinates printed on matte paper, a grainy photo clipped to the top, and one note typed in uppercase. Target is male, 19 years old. Use carfentanil. Do not underestimate. I remember holding that paper and staring at the line, "Do not underestimate." That's not something you see often in this business. Normally it's all about discretion, timing, contingencies, not warnings. Still, I took the job. The payout was too good and it was clean. No digital trail, no negotiation, just money. Half wired through a laundering front we'd used before, the rest in vacuum sealed bundles, dropped off at a P.O. box in Coldwater. I didn't even need to sign for it. Dell and I had a rule. We don't turn down clean money unless something screams. And this job, it whispered. Unsettling, yeah, but not loud enough. Dell was 10 years ahead of me in age and about 100 in experience. Ex-Army, though he didn't brag about it. The guy had this quiet, grim way of carrying himself, like he'd already died a few times and just kept walking. Scars on both legs from a failed compound recovery down in El Salvador. He didn't talk about that much. We'd been working together close to 4 years by then, mostly retrievals and high-risk security escorts. Never asked why, never stuck around after. If someone wanted a warm body delivered somewhere, we got it done, no questions. That was the line. You start asking why, and suddenly, you're part of it. This job, though it was different from the start, the kid we were sent for didn't exist. No records, no birth certificate, no ID, no name, just a face and an age. The coordinates put him somewhere in the deep woods off the grid, allegedly in a hand-built A-frame cabin that wasn't on any property ledger or satellite map. Dell pulled some chatter off survivalist forums and black sites, stuff that never stays up long. Most of it was garbage. One post just read, "It's not just wild, it's wrong." Another claimed to have seen a pale figure walking naked in the trees, moving like it had too many bones. That one stuck with me. Dell dismissed it all. You know how it is. Someone sees a shadow, next thing you know, it's a skinwalker. I wanted to believe he was right, but I still packed extra ammo. We didn't take the truck all the way in. Road gave out about 6 miles from the coordinates. So we hiked it. Steep inclined, rocky ridge lines overgrown trails that looked like they hadn't been walked in years. The trees got denser the farther we went. No birds, no wind, just the sound of our boots and the occasional crick that vanished before you could find the source. That silence started getting to me. It wasn't peaceful. It felt staged. Like everything around us had gone still because we were there. By the end of the second day, we were exhausted. Set up camp without a fire, too risky. We kept it cold and quiet. Shared binoculars and took turns watching the woods. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I saw him, standing maybe 40 yards away between 2 tall pines, completely still, like he'd been standing there a long time before I noticed. He didn't move, didn't flinch, and then he stepped backward and disappeared behind the trees. I didn't sleep after that, just lay there staring at the canopy, waiting for something else to move. At dawn, we found the shelter, nestled in a hollow almost camouflaged by the hillside. The A-frame wasn't ruined, but it looked absorbed, like the forest had started taking it back, but then changed its mind. No smoke, no markings, but the path to the door had been cleared, like someone swept it with a hand broom. Even the leaves looked organized. I positioned myself 50 yards up, prone behind a fallen tree with a tranq rifle. Dell looped around to cover the opposite side. I had a direct line of sight on the entrance. At 6:04 a.m., the door creaked open. He stepped out slow, almost robotic. No shoes, shirtless, long stringy hair hanging like spider webs, skin so pale I could see blue veins through the scope. But it was the way he moved that made my chest tighten, like his body didn't belong to him. I squeezed the trigger. The dart flew perfect, just under the collarbone. He didn't even blink. He reached up, plucked the dart out like he was a splinter, and looked right at me. Through the scope, our eyes locked. That green burned into my memory, unnatural, almost synthetic, like something copied the color but didn't understand it. Then he turned around and walked back inside. I waited. Dell returned, asked if I missed. I didn't even look at him. "No," I said. It was a clean hit. We waited another 10 minutes, no movement. Till we approached. I kept my rifle up, safety off. Inside the cabin, it was sparse. One cot, neatly made. A steaming tin cup of tea untouched. a pile of bones on a shelf not labeled, and the dart, set down on the floor, parallel to the cot, like someone had placed it there. He was yawned. Dell stepped out to do a perimeter check. I stayed in, checked the back wall, the mirror, cracked but recently cleaned. I was just about to follow him when he screamed, and Dell didn't scream. I bolted out and saw him half sunk into the ground, arms above, torso up, but everything from the waist down swallowed by a fresh hole at the base of a cedar. "Something's got me," he shouted. "It's pulling." As I grabbed him, tried to pull. Dirt was flying everywhere, but whatever had him, it was winning. I felt the force, like a rope yanking back and forth. Then came this awful snapping noise from deep in the ground, and he was gone. Like someone flushed him down. I dropped to my knees, shined my light down the hole. It spiraled like a throat. Then I saw fingers, then a shoulder, then a face. It was him, or something that used to be him. And it was crawling up, his mouth unhinged, jaws sagging down like a broken mask. The skin over his face was stretched tight, like it had forgotten how to fit. His spine shifted under the skin like it was rearranging. Then he made a sound. Not a growl, not a scream, just a hum that ate every other noise around it. I didn't wait. I ran until my lungs burned and my vision blacked out at the edges. I didn't stop until I saw my truck, rusted and half covered in vines. It started on the second try. I drove 13 hours straight without stopping. No food, no bathroom, just white knuckles and adrenaline. When the tank ran out, I left it, grabbed my bag and walked until I hit a main road. Paid a stranger $300, 0 cents cash to drive me over state lines. That night, I dumped everything. ID, licenses, SIMs, burned it all. Took a new name, moved again. That was almost an hour earlier, not even the mailbox, just trees and gravel and quiet. And honestly, I think that was part of the reason I kept going. Originally, my cousin was supposed to come with me. We've been planning this hike for a few weeks. Nothing crazy, just a couple nights out away from everything. But the morning of, he texted around 7 a.m. and said his dad needed help with fence posts and that he couldn't get out of it. I didn't really believe him. It sounded like one of those polite excuses people use when they get cold feet about the woods. I thought about giving him a crap for it, but I didn't. I just said no worries, packed up the car, and left on my own. I've done solo hikes before. I'm not trying to brag. It's not like I've done Everest or anything, but I'm comfortable in the woods. A few day trips, a solo overnight near a lake once, though that was near a campground with families and paddle boards and enough foot traffic to feel semi-civilized. This trail was different, less traveled. No recent trip reports, no cell service once you left the main road, and no rangers on duty past the entrance sign, which, for the record, I never saw. That's what made it appealing. But I hadn't meant to start this late in the day. I looked at my watch when I parked. It was exactly 5:42 p.m. A little later than ideal, but I figured I could cover a few miles before full dark. I got out of the car, stretched my legs, laced my boots tight, and hoisted my pack. There was a weird silence, not eerie, just still. Birds off in the distance, but no breeze, no insects, nothing moving nearby. I locked the car and walked toward the trailhead, ducking under a sagging wooden sign that just said trail in faded white paint. And then, like a curtain closing, the trees swallowed me up. The first mile was fine, just a steady climb and lots of damp leaves. My boots held grip, but I noticed right away how steep it got. Way steeper than it looked on the topo map I'd checked the night before. The incline wasn't punishing, but it kept me checking my pace and calculating distance in my head. I looked at my watch a lot, trying to figure out how far I could get before it got too dark to set up. The map had a small creek near mile 4, which seemed like a good place to camp. That was the goal. But the canopy got thick fast, and shadows started folding in quicker than I expected. By mile 3, I gave in and turned on my headlight. The trail narrowed as it switched back through a sharper incline, then leveled off a bit into a shallow ridge. That's when I saw the clearing, maybe 15 feet across just off the path, with a half circle of rocks blackened from old fires. The kind of spot people clearly used at some point, but not recently. No wrappers, no bottles, no footprints. Just that old, quiet feel, undisturbed. I stood there for a minute, letting my breath slow down. I scanned the trees and just listened. Nothing, that was enough for me. I got to work, tarp between two trees, found some reasonably dry wood under a fallen log, used flint and steel to spark a fire, and set a can of stew on a flat rock near the flame. While it heated, I laid out my pad, checked my gear, and made sure the essentials were close. Flashlight, boots, knife. Always. The trail was about 30 feet to my left, fading into black. The fire didn't reach that far. Beyond it, total dark. I was sitting by the fire, halfway through my stew, when something hit the ground near my boot. I didn't see it at first. I heard it, a soft little thud, like a stone hitting dirt. Then a bounce. I pointed my headlamp down. A rock, pale, round, smooth, golf ball sized, and I hadn't moved, hadn't rolled in from the trail. I checked. The leaves were undisturbed around it. There were no slopes or overhanging branches. It hadn't fallen. It had been thrown. I froze. No dramatic gasp or anything. I just went still. The kind of still where your brain hits pause while it tries to make the math add up. I slowly turned the beam of my headlamp toward the woods, just brush and trees. The beam only gave me 10, maybe 15 feet of visibility. Enough to know I was exposed, not enough to see what was out there. I stayed crouched, stew can still in one hand, light in the other. I scanned the trees for movement, for sound, for anything, but after maybe 15 minutes, I started breathing again. Told myself maybe it rolled from higher ground, maybe a squirrel knocked it loose, anything, but that didn't feel right. Not at all. I cleaned up, banked the fire, and crawled under the tarp. Flashlight to my right, knife unsheathed under my left hand. Just in case. I fell asleep eventually, and then something snapped me awake. I didn't hear a noise. I didn't see anything. I just woke up, fast and wired. The air felt heavy, like the kind of pressure change you get before a storm. Then I heard it. Leaves. Shuffling. A few steps. Then a pause. Not close enough to see, but not far either. I reached slowly for my flashlight. Done. I spun fast, heart in my throat, scanning the tarp. The light was still on, but it was out in the leaves, 12 feet away, facing the woods. Someone had moved it. I didn't move in my sleep. I don't roll. And there's no way it ended up there on its own. I grabbed my boots, shoved my feet in without tying them, and crouched low beside the fire. The coals were glowing, but the light barely reached beyond the tarp. I threw on 2 thick branches and held the knife tight. Hiking back in the dark crossed my mind, but with someone already creeping around, and my flashlight clearly tampered with, I figured I was better off staying where I could see, so I stayed up. Every hour or so I heard more movement, always in the trees, always just far enough away to be plausible deniability. My ears strained so hard it gave me a headache. At one point, it sounded like pacing. Someone walking back and forth across the trail. Slow, measured, then silence, then a low dragging sound, like something scraping bark. I didn't sleep. Just before dawn, it got worse. Footsteps, this time closer, 7 feet away. Slow, steady steps, not running, not sneaking, just walking, and then it stopped. Right behind a tree, near the edge of my tarp. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. I sat frozen, knife in hand, watching the dim firelight flicker against my pack. For what had to be 2 hours, I didn't move. I barely blinked. No breathing, no rustling, just cold silence. Eventually, the trees started to glow with early light. First gray, then blue. Birds returned. It felt like the forest had finally exhaled. I didn't waste time. Packed up without breakfast, laced my boots so tight they hurt. Double-checked my gear and stepped onto the trail without looking back once. 3 miles, every snap of a twig had me jerking my head around. Every squirrel set my heart spiking. When I saw the clearing where I parked, I sprinted. Almost dropped the keys. Got in the car, slammed the door, locked it, and backed out so fast I scraped the bumper on a rock. I didn't care. I just drove. I didn't stop until I saw pavement. Pulled into a gas station outside Galax to get a Red Bull and breathe for the first time in hours. The girl at the counter asked if I'd been camping. I nodded and didn't say a word. I was 17 when it happened. My Uncle Grant owns a handful of cabins deep in the Kentucky side of the Appalachians. They sit somewhere off grid, off map. You'd need a photo to pinpoint the turnoff. Every fall he lets families stay for a weekend. No cell reception, no streaming, just propane, firewood, and survival mode. He jokes it's brain medicine. My cousin B and I decided to take him up on the offer. She's the same age as me, same height, same taste in music, same stubbornness when it comes to calling each other out. A weekend without phones or parents felt like the last little break before senior year kicked off. We ended up at a cabin made of weathered logs, up on stilts with a metal roof and sagging porch boards that creaked beneath every step. The bedding smelled like old smoke and damp wool. Cozy in some twisted cabin way. The generator was cranky, coughing fire and then silence, then fire again. But it ran long enough to keep the fridge humming until we wanted it off. Day one was everything we hoped for. We found an old game trail that led to a stream chilled cold enough to make your toes numb. We dangled our feet in and laughed over peanut butter sandwiches. I'd ruined my bag, spooned half out beforehand. B sketched moss patterns and bark textures for something she called texture theory. And I wandered off to photograph stacks of stones piled just wrong, balanced like someone had arranged them on purpose. By the fire that night, we dared each other to share every spooky tale we'd heard. Stories of cult hideouts, ghost towns, wild men who lived in hollows. The flames popped, we laughed, but once darkness swallowed us, quiet pressed in until it felt heavy. Morning brought a walk behind the cabin. We stumbled on a rope tied chest high between two trees, rigid and old sounding. Each tree had 3 notches carved in neat lines, like tally marks or boundary signs. They were even at the same height, same shape. Survey rope? I asked. B studied it, frowned. No trail lines or boundary stuff on the map, though. We shrugged, took photos, joked about slaughters planting art in the woods, and turned back. That night I woke up to creaking. Not the moan of settling wood or the snap of sticks outside. This was steady, metronomic, like a something swinging back and forth on a hinge. I crept to the window. No rope, no swing. Just empty darkness. I nudged B. She moaned and rolled onto her other side. Morning came too quick. We went back to the rope site. It was split, cleanly severed, ends frayed tidy, fibers fresh. No footprints, no obvious tampering. The notches on the trees stayed untouched, like markers in a code. Waiting. Later, we hiked up a ridge to stretch our legs. I was tuning my lens when Beak tapped me sharply. Look, at first I didn't. Then I saw something, bound to the earth, bounding downhill. It sliced past at ground level, limbs swinging, unnatural in proportion, moving faster than anything that size should. Not a deer, not a bear, not human. It vanished into scrub before I could focus. We didn't stop to think, turned heel and walked back. At the cabin, Bea pulled her hoodie tighter and brewed tea that she sipped in the corner. Pencil poised over a page. Her sketches had gone dark, smudged corners, branches that tangled into webs. I said nothing, let her be. Then came the knock. Just once, sharp, direct, beneath the kitchen window, not wood rustling or wind. Flashlight in hand, I peeked out. Nothing. But on the porch rail lay a coil of rope, about a foot long, wound perfectly. It definitely wasn't ours. We shoved the table in front of the door, wedged a chair under the handle. B perched like a Kickstarter movie survivor, flashlight pointed at the window for hours. Sleep? Didn't visit. Morning brought my decision. We're leaving. I told her. She hesitated, said we'd look paranoid, dramatic. I had my bag open before she finished talking. We headed out around 4 a.m., hoping to beat dusk to the car. The trail looked familiar at first. Then I paused. A blue tarp snagged on a branch over a fallen log. Familiar. We passed it again. Same tarp, same log, exactly the same arrangement. B, I said, we're looping. She rolled her eyes. I told her to scratch an X on the tree. 10 minutes later, we passed the same tree, the same X, sharp and fresh. No more words. We turned around, hoping to find a way out. Then quiet settled so deep it pulsed in our ears. No insects, no wind through leaves, no bird song. Just a hush that felt alive. The rope reappeared, tight between two trees. This time something hung from its center. A rabbit, dead, split open, ribs splayed. It swung just a tremor, like it was offering us a sign. Bee backed up, hand to her mouth. I grabbed her wrist. We don't stop. We ran, my legs burning, knees stumbling over roots. The forest geometry warped. Trees leaned in too close. Paths twisted where there hadn't been turns. Ground changed textures beneath our feet. Then we glimpsed the cabin again. At first just the roof, then porch. The door swung wide. We had locked it. Pushed furniture. Now it stood opposite, beckoning. Inside, everything was wrong. Knives missing, kettle gone. B's sketchbook vanished. Though I saw it packed away, above the fireplace wall, someone had smeared letters or symbols in mud or wet dirt. Indecipherable. Smeared half away. We didn't stay for answers. I yanked my pack and hauled B's arm. Forget the trail. We go creek down, straight out, no pause. We stumbled, slipped in mud, soaked our shoes, but eventually broke through the tree line. Found gravel, a clearing, a ranger shed, a red truck. We didn't breathe until halfway home. The next day, Uncle Laurent called, asked why. The place looked wrecked. Said the back door had been tied with twine, and something dead was hanging from the outhouse handle. I told him none of that had been us. He paused, then said, "Guess I'll take that cabin off the list." We haven't talked about it again. I was 38 when I picked up a contract job out in the Western Appalachians. Not glamorous work, but it paid consistently, and more importantly, it didn't require me to deal with anyone. The university had these research stations, 6 cabins, spread out across the high ridges way out where the roads end and GPS gets glitchy. During the warmer months, the cabins were used by biology grad students and field teams studying everything from salamanders to soil chemistry. But once the weather turned, the cabins sat empty. That's where I came in. They needed someone to keep the places from falling apart in the off-season. Run routine checks. Make sure nothing had been chewed through or collapsed. Clear overgrowth if it got too aggressive. Inventory the equipment. Test the solar units and replace batteries. Just enough maintenance to keep the stations ready for spring. There wasn't a uniform or a trot or even much structure to it. Just a set of keys, some basic paperwork, and a weekly deposit into my account. The only real rule was get to all 6 sites once per loop and log everything you did. I'd been doing freelance land surveying and some part-time GIS stuff before that, so I was comfortable working alone in remote places. Honestly, I preferred it. And at the time, I figured a few months in the woods might help me reset a bit. I'd been dealing with some stuff. Needed the quiet. Each cabin had its own personality. You start to pick up on that when you're the only one going in and out for weeks at a time. Station 1 always had some wind whistling under the roofline. 2 had a flickering panel that never charged right. 3 was practically sinking into its own foundation. But Station 4 was something else entirely. It was the most isolated, sitting a full 7 miles from the nearest parking turnout. You couldn't even drive halfway. The old fire road that led up the ridge had collapsed into rubble years ago. Roots, stones, and these sharp drops where the ground had eroded under it. The only way to reach it was on foot, winding up through tight switchbacks that felt like they'd been carved by deer. No signs, no trail marker, just a faint path, and one particular rock with a red scrape across it. Your only signal to turn left. I didn't mind the hike. It was peaceful. Tough, but in a satisfying way. The silence out there felt earned. The cabin itself was simple. Small, square, sturdy, just enough space for a workbench, a cot, a few cabinets. There was a front and back door, both solid wood with old metal push-bar locks like we'd see in a school. One key fit both, and I was told it was the only copy. No spares on campus, no hidden backup. It was on my third round, 3 full loops through all 6 stations, that things started to shift. Middle October, leaves mostly down by then. The days were getting short fast. I'd saved Station 4 for last, that loop, reached it around 4:30 or so. The light was already slanting low, throwing everything into that kind of fake twilight you get in the hills. I stepped onto the porch, unlocked the front door, and walked inside like usual. Dropped my backpack, started pulling out my inventory sheets. That's when I heard it. Playing. It came from behind me, sharp, metallic. I knew immediately what it was. It was the sound of the rear door's lock disengaging. I stood completely still, just listened. Then the rear door creaked open, just a crack, and slammed shut so hard the windows rattled in their frames. Dust shook loose from the ceiling beams. My brain didn't even have time to register a theory. I was already moving. I sprinted through the cabin, yanked the back door open, ready to confront something. A hunter, some trespasser. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't what I found. Nothing, no footprints, no rustling in the trees, not even a squirrel darting off. Just a steep slope and that heavy, unnerving quiet you get when the woods stop making noise. I stood there with both hands on the doorframe, scanning the trees for anything movement, sound, breath. I felt like I'd missed something obvious, but there was nothing. Just this unnatural stillness that didn't feel like part of a forest. After a while, I went back in, locked both doors again, sat at the workbench, made myself focus, pulled the GPS from my chest strap. It was one of those clunky yellow units, real hard to lose, and set it down next to the lantern. Then I stepped out back to the little storage shed. Just 10 minutes, maybe less. I checked the water tanks, noted the levels, grabbed the fuse kit I needed for one of the inside panels. When I came back inside, the GPS was gone. At first I thought maybe I just misplaced it. I went over every inch of the cabin, searched under the cot, inside the gear locker, even behind the old heater in case it had fallen. Nothing. I dumped my pack out, went through it methodically, flipped through the battery drawer, even opened the first aid kit, like maybe I'd stuffed it in there without thinking. It was gone. It was still crouched by the bunk when I remembered the crawl space hatch. It's in the middle of the floor. I'd only opened it once before, just to check it off the first week. It led down to a shallow pit where they stored backup food, a couple wool blankets, a fire extinguisher. It had its own small padlock, different key, also on my ring. I didn't think I'd drop the GPS down there, but I figured, why not check everything? I unlocked the hatch and lifted it open. There it was, the GPS, standing perfectly upright in the center of the crawl space, screen facing the ladder like it had been posed. I remember blinking really slowly, like my brain was buffering. I climbed down one step, reached for it, picked it up. Still warm from earlier, still powered on. I didn't say anything, just closed the hatch, locked it again, and stood there, holding the GPS, like I'd never seen one before. Then came the click. Front door this time. I didn't even have to turn around. I knew the sound. Same as before. The door creaked open halfway, then slammed shut again. Harder than the last time. Deep, resonant, final. I didn't check. I didn't move. I just locked both doors again, shrugged my coat on, and stepped out onto the rock ledge at the clearing's edge. Sat down cross-legged with my arms tucked in, staring out at the horizon. I didn't go back inside until the sun had completely disappeared and the woods had gone pitch black. Even then, I hesitated. But I couldn't leave yet. My pack was inside, so were the equipment logs. I still had a job to finish. When I stepped back through the doorway, something shifted. It's hard to explain. The pressure that had been building all afternoon, like someone standing way too close without touching you, just lifted. The air felt normal again. I slept that night, but not well. Woke up every half hour. Sat up at every noise. My body kept expecting something else to happen. In the morning, I remembered the trail cam I'd installed on the first loop. Just under the awning, pointed at the front door, the footage was still there. At exactly 6:42 p.m., the door opened halfway, paused, then slammed shut with force. No person, no animal, no movement anywhere in the frame, just the door, in silence. It kept happening after that, though never the same way twice. Once, I noticed my weather gauge missing from the log shelf. Found it 3 hours later, perched on the lid of the composting toilet behind Station 2, over 4 miles away. Another time, the maintenance binder that never left my backpack turned up behind the fire tower ladder at Station 1. I hadn't visited that cabin in over a week, and I never saw any signs of tampering. No broken locks, no forced doors, just items moving around quietly, like they were being borrowed and returned in the wrong places. 1 week, I left my backup radio on the desk. When I came back, it was inside the water barrel outside, floating at the bottom. The lid was sealed tight, no scratch marks. No reason it should have been in there. I stopped telling the field office after a while. They didn't take it seriously. One guy joked maybe I had raccoons with a vendetta. Another said maybe I was just tired. I kept that routine up for another few loops. And then I quit the job completely. Back then, I had this job that didn't really fit in polite conversation. People would ask, "So, what do you do?" And I'd just say, "I walk trails," and watch them try to figure out if I was serious. I was. That was the whole gig. Sometimes I worked for parks departments, sometimes private contractors. Most of the time I went alone. Drones and topo maps are great, but they don't tell you what poison ivy's creeping in, or where the switchback's been buried under deadfall. That month, I'd picked up a contract for a section in western North Carolina, deep Appalachia. The kind of place where GPS starts lying and your phone might as well be a brick. The area I was assigned to didn't even have a proper name, just a designation, Hatcher Gap Unit 3. Sounded more like a warehouse inventory than a piece of forest. According to the notes, it hadn't been surveyed in 15 years. Still technically part of the trail network, still under management, but neglected. No campsites, no shelters, no official trailheads. It butted up against private parcels, but otherwise it was just blank green on the map, which explained why the payout was twice my normal rate. It took me over an hour to find the access gate. When I say gate, I mean what used to be one. The thing was rusted, bent sideways, half-eaten by kudzu, and about as secure as a garden fence. I left my truck tucked in off an old forestry road, packed up my tent, 2 days of food, extra batteries, and a detailed GPS grid they'd emailed me. I figured 3 days, maybe 4 tops, then out. I'd been out in rough backcountry plenty of times, places with wild boars, loose footing, sudden storms, but this felt different. Not dangerous, just odd. The trail was barely there, just these faint indentations in the hillside, a suggestion of switchbacks. No boot prints, no litter. No signs that anyone had walked it in years. Honestly, that first day wasn't bad. Physically demanding, sure, but nothing weird. I made camp before the light dipped, stretched my legs beside a tiny fire, and went through my field notebook, ticking off points like I always do. The second day is when things got complicated. I reached the first waypoint, logged the distance, checked the GPS. That leg should have been 0.4 miles. GPS said 1.1. That's not just a margin of error. I thought maybe I drifted, lost the line, circled a bit too wide, maybe bushwhacked more than I realized. It happens. Trails change, animals widen old routes, landslides knock things sideways. I shrugged, updated the notes, kept going. Late morning, I hit a ridge that didn't make any sense. The trees thinned and suddenly stopped, like someone had shaved a stripe across the slope with a lawnmower. Just this long, grassy corridor stretching clean through the trees. At first I thought it was a utility cut. Sometimes they do that for power lines. But there were no towers, no cables, just empty space. Too even to be natural, too quiet to feel right. I crossed it quick, trying not to think too much. On the other side, nailed to a rough-rutted pine, was a wooden sign. No letters, just a dark, weathered plank, warped and sagging with age. It didn't say anything, just sat there like it was watching. I took out a photo. Not because I needed it, just out of habit. You see something odd, you log it. That's the job. That night, I started hearing voices, just after sundown, muffled, low, like two people having a quiet conversation behind a wall. Except there weren't any walls, and I was 30 miles from the nearest road. I sat up in the tent, unzipped the flap, held my breath. Nothing. Then it started again, a little farther off this time. Still no actual words, just the rise and fall of speech, the cadence. I stayed dead still for almost an hour, waiting for it to come closer or go away. Eventually, it stopped. I slept, but not deeply. The next morning, I checked my camera. The picture of the sign wasn't there. Everything else was. Trail damage, erosion, tree markings, but not the sign. I scrolled back and forth like that would help. I told myself maybe the photo hadn't saved. Maybe the shutter didn't click all the way. It didn't feel true, but I needed it to be. Day 3, the trail started unraveling. Literally, sections just vanished into brush. I had to bushwhack more and more, and every time I recalculated, I ended up somewhere unexpected. I started marking trees with blazes, bright orange paint stripes. I always carry a small can for that exact reason. I made 7 of them by midday, spacing them so I could retrace my route if things got worse. Later that afternoon, I passed one of them again. Same tree, same ridge, same little run of paint where it dripped and dried in the notch of the bark. But my compass still pointed north, and I hadn't turned around. I stared at it for a long time. Then I kept going. Didn't say anything, just moved. That night, I didn't light a fire. It was dead quiet. Then something brushed the tent. Not wind, not an animal. It wasn't random enough for that. It was slow, deliberate, like fingertips dragging across nylon. I stopped breathing. Then it came again, lower this time, tracing the curve of the tent wall like it was trying to find the edge. I whispered, "Go away." They came back from somewhere in the trees, same exact words. "Go away, go away." My voice, flat, hollow, off by just enough to make my skin go tight. I didn't close my eyes once that night. At first light, I broke camp fast. I started walking harder than I should have, checking GPS every few minutes, trying to lock in the next waypoint. But everything was off. The terrain didn't match the grid. The sun rose over my left shoulder, which should have meant I was heading south, but the compass still said north. I stopped trusting everything. Eventually I walked into a clearing. It was the same one from my first night. Same scorched fire ring. Same moldy log. Same angle of the hillside. I hadn't doubled back. I knew I hadn't. My notebook was clear. Straight line progress, every point logged. But somehow, I'd returned to the exact spot I'd started from. My orange blazes were gone. Every single one. At that point I stopped thinking. I started going downhill. Didn't matter where, just down. I followed gravity like it was the only thing I could trust. No birds, no animals, just my breathing and the sound of my boots. After a few hours, I found a stream. That should have been good news. Water usually means you're near a boundary. Then I saw a pile of trash on the bank, crushed protein bar wrapper, broken tent pole, a roll of my own flagging tape, still sealed. I'd already been there. I crossed that same stream the day before. I sat down under a tree, opened my knife. Not for anything in particular, just wanted it open. I waited. The sky never changed. No sun, no shadows. Just this weird gray half-light like the world forgot what time it was. No birds, no wind, just dead air and that cold feeling you get when something's watching. Then I saw it. Through a break in the trees 50 yards off was the forestry gate. My truck was still there, covered in pine needles, dusted with leaves. It looked like it had been parked for months. I ran, full sprint. I don't even remember getting in, just the slam of the door and the weight of the key in the ignition. It turned. I reversed out like a madman, tires slipping on the gravel. I didn't stop until I hit asphalt and got cell service. I called the number on my job sheet. Forestry office out of Asheville. A guy picked up. I gave him my location and told him what I saw. He went quiet for a while. Then he said no one had been in Hatcher Gap since 2006. 2 contractors went missing out there. Their equipment turned up. Not them. The unit wasn't closed officially. It was just left off future assignments. I'm 13 years old, and my uncle's cabin in the Smoky Pines used to be the one place on earth where I felt completely, unquestionably safe. He built it himself after walking away from his job in Savannah. One of those dramatic life shifts people talk about but rarely follow through on. Somewhere between a midlife crisis and some kind of frontier fantasy. The cabin was deep in the woods, 2 miles up this rough gravel track that wasn't marked on any map, and if it had rained recently, the last half mile was too muddy for the truck, so we'd hike in on foot. No cell service, no neighbors, just trees for miles, and the kind of quiet you only notice when you realize how much noise you've been living with. Every fall, right when the leaves started changing, we'd go for a couple of weeks. It was a tradition. Something we all looked forward to. The place always smelled like wood smoke and dry pine. There'd be jerky laid out in paper bags on the counter, and an old gas lantern that hung above the dining table and hissed when you turned it up too high. Uncle Darren called it his peace place. I used to think of it like a sealed bubble. Totally untouched. Nothing bad could get in, nothing weird could follow you up that road. I used to believe that completely. That October, we were staying longer than usual, full 2 weeks. My parents were seriously looking at land nearby. They kept saying stuff like, "Wouldn't it be something to build here when we retire?" I was all in. The idea of growing up surrounded by that much green, no traffic, no city noise. I loved it, and at first it was perfect. I always slept in the loft room upstairs. The ceiling sloped so low, you had to crouch to get to the bed, but it had this tiny square window that looked straight out at the trail behind the house. Uncle Darren had carved that path himself, cleared the brush, and hammered in little signs to mark the twists. He said it looped around to a lookout bluff where you could see the whole Creek Valley. I always wanted to go the whole way, but I wasn't allowed without an adult. The first couple mornings I woke up early and just watched. Deer would come through in 2s and 3s, picking their way between trees. Sometimes a squirrel would tear across the path like it was late for something. It felt still and calm and kind of perfect. Then, the second morning, I heard running water. It was faint at first, but sharp enough to echo through the walls. A metallic kind of trickle. I came down the stairs and found the kitchen's hand pump sink going full tilt. Water pouring into the basin and splashing onto the counter. The steel handle was pushed upright, and this wasn't some faucet you just nudged on. You had to work for it, a hard pull to get anything flowing. Everyone else was still asleep. I pressed the handle back down and it groaned and stopped. I stood there for a while, waiting for someone to come out and say they'd just used it and forgot to shut it off. But no one did. When Uncle Darren finally came down later, I asked if he'd used the pump that morning. He shook his head. Nope, might be a pressure thing. I didn't bleed the line this week. He didn't seem that bothered, but the thing was, you couldn't fake that pump turning on. The handle doesn't just float upward, you had to physically pull it. It didn't sit right with me. 2 days later, things got stranger. From my room, just before sundown, I looked out and saw someone standing on the trail. A person-shaped figure, not close enough to make out details, just the outline. They were standing right where the trail bent into the thicker part of the woods, facing the house, not moving, just there. At first I assumed it was Uncle Darren out on his evening walk, but he usually carried this old walking stick, and he never stood still like that. He'd walk slow, but always with purpose. I watched the figure for about 10 seconds. I blinked, and it was gone, just like that. I asked Uncle Darren later if anyone ever came that far up the trail. He shook his head. Nah, it's private. Only weirdos hike the north slope, and there's nothing up there to hunt. I tried to let it go. Probably my imagination, right? Until the next morning. This time, I saw the same shape again, a little closer, standing dead still near a cedar just off the path. Not blinking, not walking. Just watching. I didn't blink. I kept staring. After a few seconds, it stepped back into the trees and vanished. That was it. No more upstairs alone for me. I started sleeping on the couch. Then the music thing started. I had this old iPod with a cracked screen and all my favorite music on it. A lot of pop punk, heavier rock, screeny stuff that made me feel a little older. I had this tiny speaker dock I'd plug into the outlet behind the wood stove. The first time it glitched, I thought it was just the cable. Music paused mid-track. I walked over, checked the connection, pressed play again. It paused 5 seconds later. I tried different songs. Same thing, but only the loud ones. If I played something mellow or slow, some indie folk or acoustic tracks, it played fine. No interruptions, no weird pauses. I thought maybe the speaker couldn't handle bass, but it had worked fine at home. Eventually I noticed something else. The loud songs only paused if I wasn't holding the iPod. Like if I left it sitting in the dock across the room, it would skip or stop. But if I was holding it, it kept playing. Sometimes, not always. It felt intentional. One night, I got frustrated and said out loud, "All right, I'll switch." The next track was something soft. It played all the way through, smooth as anything. After that, I didn't test it anymore. A few nights later, my parents drove into Alderfield with Uncle Darren to have more firewood and supplies. I stayed back to watch Wyatt, my little cousin. He was 4 and obsessed with a cartoon about talking farm animals. We watched 3 episodes, he conked out on the couch, and I settled into the far end with a blanket. Around 9:30 I started to doze off. The fire was still going, everything was quiet. Then I heard footsteps, crunching slowly over the gravel behind the house. Steady. Rhythmic. Like someone walking slowly toward the back door. I sat up and called out, "Uncle Darren?" Nothing. Then I heard the back door creak, just a little, like someone testing the handle, and a second later, the pump in the kitchen started going. I walked in, and sure enough, the handle was upright again, water pouring out, like someone had just let go of it. I slammed the handle down and stepped outside. No one was there. No headlights, no voices. The trees stood still. When everyone got back, and I told them, every word, even the part about seeing the figure on the trail. Uncle Darren just went still. Then he said, "That pump doesn't hold itself. You got to keep weight on it to keep water flowing," which meant something was physically holding it open. I didn't sleep much that night. Every noise sounded like footsteps. Every creak felt too long. The next morning, I pretended I had a stomach ache so I wouldn't have to go out. I stayed by the windows, glancing toward the trail, half waiting for that shape to reappear. But the woods stayed still until the last day. We were packing up. Mom and Dad were outside loading up the truck. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing math homework, pretending everything was back to normal. Above the sink was this cuckoo clock, old and broken. No weights, no pendulum, just a dusty wooden bird in a box. At 5:45 exactly, it chimed. Once, clear, mechanical. I looked up. The hands had moved. Then I heard the pump creak again, but this time the handle wasn't up. The water was rising from the drain, coming up, slowly, steadily, like something was forcing it backwards through the pipe. I didn't wait. I bolted, sat outside with the bags until morning. We didn't talk about it on the way home. My parents acted like nothing happened. Uncle Darren still lives there. He says the clock hasn't made a sound since. I was 17 when it happened. My uncle Cal worked one of those old fire towers out near the Virginia border, tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains where cell signals don't even bother trying. His tower sat on this high ridge, 5 miles in on foot from the nearest old logging road. No cabins, no side trails, nothing man-made except the path and the tower itself. Once a month, the ranger station would send someone up with basic supplies, water jugs, canned food, batteries, backup parts for the radio. It wasn't glamorous, but Cal liked the solitude. That month, though, he took a bad step on the stairs while feeding his dogs and rolled his ankle. Not broken, but bad enough he couldn't hike. So he called me. "You're young," he said. "Got strong legs. Think you can do the drop for me this time?" I said sure. I liked Cal, and honestly, I liked the quiet too. I left early that morning, right after sunrise. My parents let me borrow the truck, an old wheezy thing that groaned the whole way up the gravel road like it was protesting the effort. I parked where the road ends, grabbed the pack from the back, and headed out. All the usual signs were posted on the trailhead board. Watch for bears, don't hike alone, respect forest boundaries. But something new had been added to the old, weather-warped wooden post. Right under the painted "Stay on the Trail" sign, someone had carved a face. Not detailed, just weird. Long oval shape, eye set too high, and this tiny straight line for a mouth. It looked new, fresh, like it had been cut in the past week. I ran my fingers over it without really thinking. It didn't mean anything at the time. The trail starts pretty flat, but by mile 2, you're definitely working. Roots, mud, a few places where the trail all but disappears under brush. By the 3rd mile, I was soaked in sweat and starting to regret not packing a second bottle of water. I stopped on a shale outcrop to take a breather. The trees were pressed in so tight on either side of the trail, you couldn't see more than 10 feet into the woods, and there was this quiet, not peaceful exactly. More like the forest was holding its breath. I heard something shift behind me. Branches moving, but not like a breeze. Something heavy, slow. I turned fast. Nothing. No movement. No birds fluttering away. Just the stillness coming back in like a tide. I stayed frozen for a minute, listening. Then I kept walking. Faster than before. About halfway up the ridge, I saw someone coming down the trail toward me. An older guy, maybe mid-60s, with a gray beard and this patched-up canvas jacket that looked like it had been through some stuff. No backpack, no gear, just a long wooden stick leaned on like a cane. He looked at me as we passed but didn't speak right away. Just a small nod. Then, real quiet, almost like an afterthought, he said, "Don't go past where the trees bend wrong." I stopped. "Sorry, what?" But he kept walking, slow and steady, like I hadn't said anything. I turned to look after him maybe 10 seconds later. Nothing. Just empty trail behind me. No movement, no sound of footsteps. It was like he just vanished. The tower came into view not long after. It sits right on the crest, this spindly rust-red frame with a weathered wooden lookout cabin on top. 30 feet tall, maybe more. The clearing around it is patchy grass and rock, not really enough room for anything but the tower itself and a little fire ring Cal never used. I climbed the spiral stairs and saw the trapdoor was already unlatched. Inside, everything was the same as always. Minimal and tidy. Cot in one corner, fold-out table with maps and logbooks, shelves with labeled storage bins. The radio unit blinked like it was still receiving a weak signal. I dropped the pack, swapped out the old batteries, lined up the new water jugs, and plugged the charger into the solar panel. Then I flipped through the logbook. Al always dated his entries and included little weather notes or odd wildlife sightings. But the last page had nothing written. No date, no notes. Just a drawing in the bottom corner, pencil or charcoal, pressed deep into the paper. It was that same face. Oval, eyes too high, mouth curved down just slightly at the corners. It wasn't frowning, it wasn't smiling. It looked like someone trying to copy a human face from memory and getting it wrong. I didn't love that, but I was tired. My legs ached, and the thought of hiking 5 miles back down before dark felt like more work than I cared to do. So I decided to stay the night. It wasn't against the rules exactly. Cal had done it plenty. I locked the trapdoor from the inside and pushed the cot over it, mostly just for peace of mind. Then I sat by the window for a while, watching the trees along the ridge fade into the dark. Sometime after 2 a.m., the motion light kicked on. It's a little thing mounted over the stairwell, barely enough to light the platform below. But the second it snapped on, I was wide awake. I sat up and looked through the gaps in the floorboards. The platform was lit, pale and still, but there were no footsteps on the stairs, no creaking, no wind to silence. The light didn't flicker, didn't shut off, just stayed on, like someone was standing just out of view. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just sat there for hours, staring through the floor, waiting for something, anything, to make a sound. Nothing did. At first light, I grabbed my bag and got out. I don't even remember eating. I just left. The cot was still against the trap door, and I stepped over it without even sliding it back. A mile into the descent, I hit the spot. I don't know how else to describe it except the trees were wrong. They bent inward over the trail, but not from age or weight. They tilted toward something. The trunks leaned in, like they were being pulled or had twisted themselves on purpose. Their branches overlapped above like a canopy, trying to seal the trail shut. The air underneath felt colder, even though the sun was up. I remembered the old man's voice. Don't go past where the trees bend wrong. I considered going around, but the slope dropped off fast on both sides. There wasn't really a choice, so I walked through. Right in the middle of the bend, I saw a canvas nailed to a tree, real painting, not some sketch. It was water damaged, but clear enough to see. It showed the tower, but distorted. The windows were just dark shapes like eye sockets. The antenna was missing, and the sky above was a sickly gray, streaked with jagged white lines that looked almost like teeth or cracks. A little further down, another painting leaned against a boulder. Same tower, but now the door was open. Something was standing inside. Tall, spindly arms, fingers too long. And the face, that same face, blank, watching. I turned around. The trail behind me looked totally normal, empty. Then came the third painting. Right before the descent, it showed me, standing at the trailhead, same clothes, same scar above my eyebrow, but behind me, crouched in the brush, was a figure, the same one, lurking just out of reach, its head tilted slightly, face stretched, too long to be human. I left the pack, just dropped it and ran. Didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't breathe until I was back in the truck with the doors locked and my hands shaking. I didn't answer Cal's calls for 3 days. Then the ranger station left a message. Said he'd gone up to the tower himself. He called me that night. His voice was stiff, strained. You leave something behind? He asked. I said no. He said there was a drawing on the desk. Looked like your style, but It wasn't. He says the sketch showed the two of us in the tower, standing across from each other, but my face, he said it looked wrong. The mouth stretched too far, the eyes were higher than they should be, and in the drawing, I was holding something out to him. Something small, wrapped in bark. He said, "It's hidden, open it." I told him not to touch anything else, just burn the page, get out of there. He said he would. Next morning, the ranger station called again. Cal was missing. They found the tower locked from the inside. The cot was still against the trap door, no signs of a struggle, no footprints on the stairs. The cabin was farther out than I realized. Somewhere up near Calhoun Ridge, maybe 4 miles past where the paved road ended and the gravel started pretending to be a road. I had to slow down twice for deer and once for what I'm still convinced was just a boulder shaped like a bear. When I finally pulled up, the place looked exactly like the pictures. Big porch, sloped roof, everything surrounded by trees that made you feel like you were inside a snow globe. I'd found it online through a listing that promised total seclusion and perfect for creatives. It had no Wi-Fi, no cell reception, and no neighbors within shouting distance. That was the draw. I wanted to unplug completely. No notifications, no email, just me and my half-finished manuscript. A few weeks of nothing but quiet and focus. I packed pretty carefully, brought all my food for the stay, plenty of water, my laptop, notebooks, a solar charger, and backup batteries. The host had left instructions to find a key under a flat stone by the steps. Inside the door frame, bolted into the wood, was a weatherproof lockbox with a satellite phone for emergencies. I tested it right away. 2 bars, signal held. It felt like exactly what I needed. I figured the quiet would be the biggest challenge. No city noise, no podcasts, no hum of other people existing nearby. But after a couple of days, I eased into it. I started waking up early without an alarm. Mornings were for writing, afternoons for the trail that looped down past a little stream and curved back up behind the cabin. Evenings I'd read until the light faded, make something simple for dinner, maybe a cup of tea, and go to bed embarrassingly early. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was clean. I even stopped noticing the absence of sound, until I had to. On the 8th night, something changed. It was late. I'd just finished brushing my teeth, still chewing that last sleepy yawn, and when I reached to close the bathroom door, it caught part way. Didn't close all the way, just bounced slightly like it hit something. I opened it again. The edge of the frame had warped just a little, enough that the latch no longer lined up properly, and there was a shallow gouge in the door frame, low near the handle. Like someone had tried to wedge it open with something flat and metal. I hadn't damaged it. I'd barely touched the door all week. I stood there, toothbrush still in my hand, staring at the spot. Not because I didn't know what I was seeing, but because I couldn't figure out how it could have happened. Then I noticed the footprints, just 2, right next to the tub, muddy. Not fresh enough to be wet, but not dry either. They were too deliberate to be accidental. Someone had placed their feet there carefully, deliberately. They weren't mine. Smaller, narrower, not shaped like boots. The edges were round, almost like they'd been made by someone barefoot, and they were still, like whoever made them had stood completely motionless. I wiped them up without thinking, like I was cleaning up a spill. I even checked the rest of the floor, looking for more, but there was nothing. Just those 2. I told myself I must have tracked something in. Maybe I'd walked in with damp socks and stepped weird. Maybe I was overthinking. I do that sometimes. But the next morning, the kitchen table had moved. It wasn't a dramatic shift, just enough that I noticed immediately. One leg had kicked the rug into a fold, sitting half on it, half off. The whole table was about 6 inches left of where it had been. I hadn't touched it. I stared at it, coffee mug in hand, letting the steam rise into my face while my brain scrambled for a practical explanation. Then I said out loud, "If someone's here, I want you to leave. No idea who I thought would answer. I checked the whole cabin, methodically. Front door, back door, both still locked. Windows shut tight. That little basement hatch under the rug was still sealed with a rusted padlock. I even tugged on it, just to be sure. There were no signs of forced entry, no new footprints, nothing broken or missing. But the energy in the cabin had shifted. You know how sometimes a room feels heavier, like you just walked into the middle of a conversation you weren't supposed to hear? It was like that. That afternoon, I made sure the satellite phone was fully charged and stuck it in my jacket pocket before heading out on the trail. I didn't like the idea of leaving it behind. The hike didn't feel relaxing anymore. That night, I locked the bedroom door. At around 1 in the morning, I woke up with no clear reason why. No noise, no dreams, just suddenly wide awake, like someone had flipped a switch in my head. Then I heard the sound, a single thump from downstairs. Not loud, just the kind of sound furniture makes when something shifts against it, or when something heavy is set down carefully. I stayed still, absolutely still. I didn't even blink for a while, just stared at the bedroom door. Eventually I got up, grabbed the flashlight and the phone, and made my way downstairs. Living room, quiet. Kitchen, unchanged. Bathroom, still open. Door warped, but the shower curtain closed. Pulled tight. I never close it, ever. I hate not being able to see behind it. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Then I reached out, pulled it back. The tub was empty, but the footprints were there again, in the same place, same shape. This time they were wet. I didn't touch them. I backed out of the room, pulled the door closed with shaking fingers, and sat on the couch until morning. I kept the satellite phone in my lap the whole time, glancing at it like I expected it to ring on its own. When daylight came, I checked the tub again. The prints were gone. I hadn't cleaned them, they just weren't there anymore. Outside, the ground was undisturbed. Not a single footprint in the mud around the cabin. No scuffs near the windows. The forest around the porch looked untouched. Nothing made sense. That evening, I left every light on. I couldn't bring myself to cook, let alone write. I just sat on the couch, watching the stairs like something might come down. Then, at 4:32 a.m. exactly, I heard it, 3 slow creaks. Not from downstairs, from my room. The exact sequence of sounds the floor makes when you walk from the window to the closet. But I wasn't upstairs. I didn't move. Didn't even shift my weight. I just stared at the top of the staircase, waiting to see a shadow, a face, anything. Nothing came. When the sun finally came up, I crept back upstairs. Room was empty, closet door shut, window still latched. But the front door standing wide open, not cracked, not swinging, just standing, fully open, like someone had walked out and forgot to close it behind them. I walked out slowly. The air felt brittle, like if I breathed too hard, something would snap. There were no birds, no sounds at all. I went straight to the lockbox, pulled out the satellite phone. It took 4 tries to get through. A man answered. Cabin emergency services. Are you in need of assistance? Yes, I said. Someone's coming in at night. They're not taking anything. They're just standing there. In the bathroom, the bedroom. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he asked, can you read me the cabin ID number? I gave it to him. Not Pines, West Unit 3. Long pause. Are you alone in the unit? Yes. Can you confirm the label on the phone says Unit 3? I turned it over. Yeah, it does. Another pause. Okay, he said. Listen carefully. Pack your things, leave immediately. Do not stay another night. I asked what was going on, if they'd had reports like this before, if someone had been living in the cabin. He said, someone will meet you at the trailhead. Don't speak to anyone on the way down, even if they say your name. Then the call dropped. That last part, even if they say your name. I threw everything into my bags, didn't even zip them properly. The trail didn't feel right. Some of the turns were too sharp, some were missing. Familiar trees were gone. Other trees were in the wrong places. It was like I was walking through a copy of the trail that had been reassembled. From memory, I heard voices. Twice. First one said, you dropped something. Sounded exactly like my brother. but he was 1,000 miles away. Second one said, "Tom, stop, please." And that one sounded like me. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. By the time I reached the trailhead, I could barely stand. There was a woman in a gray uniform standing beside a white truck. "You're from Unit 3?" she asked. I nodded. "You still have the phone?" I handed it to her. "Did you speak to anyone on the trail?" she asked. "Did you answer?" I hesitated. I don't know what that means. She didn't say anything, just got in the truck and drove off. I don't know what I walked away from. I filed a complaint the next week. Never got a response. Checked the listing again. Gone. No forwarding page. No trace. I haven't been back to the mountains since. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent just about my entire life working in or around the Appalachian Mountains. I grew up in a house where the tree line wasn't something you visited. It was just there, like a fence around everything. Honestly, the woods raised me just as much as my folks did. Probably more. I've cut timber in rain that'd turn your skin purple. Walked survey lines in places where the GPS just shrugs, and pulled overnight watch in hollers so quiet you could hear your heartbeat bounce off the trees. I've stumbled across bear dens, meth shacks, rusted out Cadillacs filled with bones that didn't look quite animal. I even ran into a guy once who claimed he hadn't spoken to another human in 12 years. But nothing I've seen, not a single strange or dangerous thing in all that time, ever worked its way under my skin like what I saw that winter out past McKinley Ridge, not far west of Ember Gap. Now, my mother's people were Shawnee, and my grandmother didn't say much, but when she did, you listened. Her voice never really rose above a whisper, not even when she was mad, which was often. She had this presence to her. One of those people who could make you feel like you were the one being ridiculous for questioning her, even when she wasn't saying anything. She had these rules for the woods, stuff I used to roll my eyes at when I was younger, like don't whistle after dark, don't leave your boots pointed at the door when you sleep, and if you ever see someone in the woods trying to wave you over, don't follow them unless you're sure you saw them walk out of camp first. I asked her why once, and she just said, "There are things older than the trees out there." It wasn't meant to scare me. That was just her way. She gave you facts, not feelings. It was a warning, not a story. Back then, I didn't pay much attention. Chalked it up to old stories and the quiet superstition. Until I didn't. This happened about 15 years ago. I was working a contract job for a logging company that had just secured some untouched acreage deep in the Blue Ridge. That timber was the real deal. Mature red spruce, fat old hickories, tulip poplar thick as silos, big money trees. But it was isolated, the kind of isolated where the road turns to gravel, then the gravel turns to dirt, and then the dirt just ends. And the rest is prayer. Our crew went in first to prep the access lines, open up trails wide enough for the machines to roll in without flipping sideways. It was rough terrain. Most of it was barely marked, and the roads were more memory than anything paved. We had 2 foremen, 6 guys in the field, and a handful of trailers set up on a ridge above this skinny valley. No cell coverage, radios only. And those had to be checked every 6 hours to make sure we hadn't fallen into a ravine or gotten taken out by a falling limb. That's when the equipment started going missing. First, it was just a chainsaw, probably just misplaced, we thought. But then it was one of the portable generators. Not a small thing to lose. No one heard anything. No prints. Nothing on the trail cams we'd set up for bear activity. Figured maybe someone local was sneaking in, stripping gear to pawn. I don't like feeling played, so I volunteered for night watch. Figured I'd sit up a few nights and put an end to it. I kept things low key. No big spotlights, just a flashlight, a radio, and a thermos full of truck stock coffee that probably qualified as a health hazard. Nights up there in January are no joke. The kind of cold that bites through denim like it's tissue paper. You don't even shiver. You just go stiff. First 3 nights, dead quiet. A few raccoons, maybe a deer, normal stuff. But on the fourth night, somewhere around 2 in the morning, I heard voices. It wasn't shouting, not yelling or groaning, just soft talking, quick, like overlapping murmurs. Male and female both, but the tone was strange. Something about the rhythm. It wasn't English, at least not clearly. The words tumbled over each other, like chanting, but too fast. The cadence reminded me of these old tapes my uncle used to have of Cherokee hymns. Same kind of lilt at the end of each phrase, that rising and falling flow, familiar in a way that made me uneasy. Though I couldn't have told you why, I was near the tool trailer when I heard it. The sound came from down the slope, in the woods, just at the edge where my flashlight couldn't reach. I killed the light and crouched. The sound moved. Now it was upslope, then it was behind me. No crunching, no footsteps, no sign of anything actually moving, just voices hopping around like they were skipping across glass. I tried the radio, just static. I checked the trailers, 8 in all, every door locked, everyone asleep, nothing out of place. I clipped my hatchet to my belt and stayed within reach of the main trailer until sunrise. The voices cut off about 10 minutes before first light, like someone yanked the plug. When the foreman came by to swap shifts, I told him I thought someone was scoping us out. He didn't blink, just said, "This ridge don't like being disturbed." I asked what he meant by that. He didn't answer, just walked off. 2 weeks later, we were working a new section near Weaver Hollow. That place had a reputation for weird weather. Fog that came in heavy and low, even when the sky was clear. Cold pockets that didn't burn off even by noon. Trees were taller, older, and some had this black streaking along the bark that looked almost charred. But there hadn't been a fire out there in decades. That day I was paired with Micah, a younger guy from Lancaster. Good worker, new to the woods. His idea of camping was hotel cable not working. We were laying fiber through a new flagged route between ridge lines. Took the ATV out, followed the markers, but the trail didn't line up with the map. Boulders weren't where they were supposed to be. A stand of trees we passed an hour earlier showed up again on the other side. Something was off. Then we rolled into this clearing that wasn't marked anywhere. It looked unnatural, too circular, too flat, like someone scooped out a chunk of the mountain. There wasn't any birdsong, no bugs, just silence, dense and waiting. I stopped the ATV. Micah hopped out, started fiddling with his phone, trying to check signal. I stayed seated, map open in my lap, trying to figure out how we got turned around. That's what I saw the deer, big buck, maybe 8 points, just standing near the tree line, facing sideways, but its head was turned all the way toward us, ears flicking, not grazing, just watching. Then the trees opened. No crack of branches, no rustle of leaves, just open like a door, and something stepped out. It wasn't a bear. I know bears. This thing walked like a man, except nothing about it was human. Broad-shouldered, arms too long, almost down to its knees, reddish fur, matted in places. Head low, sunk into the chest, like it had no neck. And the face is what still visits me. The eyes were deep set, no whites, no shine, just flat black pits that didn't reflect light. The mouth hung slack, square teeth packed too tight, more than should fit in a jaw. It moved fast. 3 strides and it had the buck. One hand on the antlers, the other gripping the hindquarters. A twist and the deer folded like wet paper. Then it looked at me, not just at me, into me, and I felt it. My whole chest clenched, and my legs locked like I'd been flash frozen. I didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then it turned around and walked back into the trees, carrying that buck like it weighed nothing. Micah never saw it, eyes glued to his phone the whole time. I didn't say a word, just started the ATV and told him we were pulling back. He didn't ask why. We found the correct trail an hour later, finished the run in silence, got back right before dusk. Foreman was waiting. He asked, "How'd the ridge look?" I said, "We got off track. Terrain's weird, but we got it done." He stared at me a little longer than necessary. Then he said, "All right, don't go that way again tomorrow." I nodded. Didn't argue, didn't ask. I never told Micah what I saw. Never told my kids. The plan was simple. 3 quiet days from Asheville to Pittsburgh, staying off the main roads, just letting the mountains unfold in front of me. I wasn't in a hurry. I quit my job the week before, finally ended a relationship that had been coasting on autopilot for too long, and didn't want to answer any more texts that said, "You okay?" I wasn't, really. But I didn't want anyone trying to fix it. I packed light, just one old green duffel bag with a few clothes, a water bottle, charger, a paperback I probably wasn't going to read, and a roll of quarters in case I ended up at a laundromat or just wanted something solid in my pocket. I downloaded a bunch of offline maps, tossed the bag in the back seat, and left before sunrise. It felt good. No clock, no itinerary, just me and whatever cracked back roads I decided to follow. First day was uneventful. Some winding routes through the Blue Ridge, quiet towns, diners with strong coffee. I slept in the car that night, tucked into a corner of a national forest lot with the windows cracked. A little cold, but not bad. The second day, I drifted farther north, letting the Appalachian foothills swallow me up. Roads got thinner, less maintained, houses farther apart. The kind of areas where you drive for miles without seeing another car, and the only signs of life were homemade mailboxes or crooked porch chairs. It wasn't spooky, just still, like the land had stopped waiting for people a long time ago. I didn't even realize how low my gas was until the light blinked on. My GPS had been going in and out all morning, mostly searching or frozen on some distant dot that clearly wasn't where I was. I pulled over and gave the screen a good hard reset, like that ever helps. Nothing changed. That's when I remembered passing a rusted out metal sign about 10 minutes back. Elmer's Fork, Pop, 42. Could barely read it. The letters were faded into the same dull orange as the rust swallowing the edges. I hadn't planned to stop, but with the gas light now flashing and no idea how far I was from anything resembling a town, I slowed down at the next curve, hoping to see a convenience store or some kind of landmark. Instead, I got a sign nailed to a tree. Gas Store Lodge, with a red arrow pointing right, down a steep gravel path. The lettering was uneven and faded, like it had been painted by someone who didn't often use brushes. I sat there for a second, engine idling, thumb tapping the wheel. Everything about it screamed, "Don't." But the blinking gaslight made the decision for me. The gravel road dropped fast, and the canopy overhead got so thick that it felt like twilight, even though it wasn't yet 4. My tires kicked up pebbles, and more than once I thought I'd taken a wrong turn. The road narrowed, snaked unpredictably, seemed to disappear entirely before revealing another sharp bend. Then, without warning, the trees pulled back, and I rolled into a clearing. One building, small, weathered, wood siding warped from age and sun, and in front of it a single gas pump, metal faded to the color of old dishwater. Hose coiled like it hadn't moved in a year. I let the car idle and look around. No cars, no power lines, no signs of life. My engine ticked in the silence like a clock trying to remember what it was. When I stepped inside, a tiny bell gave a weak metallic ring. The smell hit me first. Old wood and something damp. Not quite mold, not quite vinegar, just stale in a way that clung to your clothes. Shelves lined the walls, dusty cans of food, knockoff batteries, a weird selection of pocket knives still in plastic clamshells. There was a narrow counter with an ashtray and a newspaper laid open, like someone had walked off mid-corrector. Behind it stood a man, older, maybe late 60s, with slick-back gray hair and a denim shirt that might have once been blue. He didn't look it up. Just turned the page. "Just need gas," I said, because what else do you say? He didn't answer. didn't nod. After a few seconds, he pulled a key ring from a nail on the wall, shuffled outside, and manually unlocked the pump. I followed him out, the gravel crunching under our feet. I started filling the tank. The numbers rolled slowly, like the pump wasn't in a rush either. "How far is the next town?" I asked, mostly just to hear another voice. He didn't look at me, just said, "Next one that direction don't exist anymore." It was the kind of line that made me pause, like maybe he meant it literally. But before I could ask, he'd turned and gone back inside. I paid cash, climbed back in, and turned the key. My phone lit up like it was booting, then froze on the startup logo. I waited, restarted it again. Still stuck. I eased back onto the gravel road, but the way back looked wrong. The curves weren't the same. There was a fork in the road that definitely hadn't been there before. I took the left side. About 10 minutes in, I passed a burned-out trailer. Roof collapsed, the windows blackened. The screen door hung crooked, swaying slightly even though the air was completely still. I stopped, turned around, took the right fork this time. 5 minutes later, the same trailer. Same door creaking back and forth. I hit the brakes, turned the engine off. No wind, no birds, no cars, not even distant sounds, just the uncomfortable hiss of silence pressing against the windows. I opened the door, stood up and stretched. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, steady crunches behind me. I spun around. A woman was walking toward me. She was barefoot, her hair pulled into a tight braid. She wore a long, pale moule dress with buttons down the front, like something pulled out of an old church portrait. Her face was calm. Too calm. Her smile was wrong. It wasn't joyful. It was polite, performed, like she was playing a part. "You're supposed to come back now," she said. That's all. Not, "Are you lost?" Not, "Need help?" Just that. I stepped back into the car, locked the doors, and threw it in reverse. She kept walking, but never picked up her pace. I didn't look at her face again. A few minutes later, I passed the trailer again, but now a man was on the porch. Big frame, flannel jacket, thick beard. He held something long in both hands, maybe a metal rod or a piece of pipe. He didn't wave, didn't blink, just stared. I drove faster, still no signal, still no working map. The road twisted and rose until I reached a ridge. Up ahead, a small wooden bridge stretched across a shallow gap. It looked like it had been forgotten decades ago. Boards warping, handrails broken. I stopped just before it, killed the engine again, trying to think. That's when I heard it. A whistle. Unsingle, sharp note. Paused. Then again. Same note. Same rhythm. No melody. Just insistence. I didn't wait to hear it a third time. I turned the key and floored it back the way I came, swerving hard at the fork and taking a path I hadn't noticed before. An incline that wound sharply uphill. The trees started to thin. Light broke through in patches. Around a long curve, I saw something ahead. The store. Same damn store. Except now, the front door had a new sign. Spray painted in messy red letters. Closed. I didn't stop. I didn't look in the windows. I just kept driving. Eventually, the road ended at an overlook. Stone wall, scenic valley, textbook peaceful. Except there were no roads in the valley, no buildings, no movement. Just blank space. I parked, got out. My phone buzzed. One bar, I raised it to take a photo, proof maybe. Something to anchor me to a real place. Then I turned around. She was standing in the middle of the gravel road. Same dress, same braid. Same vacant smile. She didn't speak this time, just watched. I got in the car and drove straight off the overlook path, crashing through underbrush and snapping dead limbs. I didn't stop until I hit pavement. Real pavement. Smooth. Paint lines. I took the first road with a mile marker. 10 minutes later, I saw a sign for I-79. I didn't slow down, just merged on and didn't look back. That night, I stopped at a gas station outside Fairmont, pulled under the fluorescent lights, and just sat there. hands still on the wheel. When I finally checked my phone, there was no sign of Elmer's Fork. Not on any map, no photos, no route history. My cousin Daniel's cabin sat way up in the Smokies, tucked into one of those wooded hollows where the air feels heavier and the trees lean in close like they're listening. It was about 6 miles from the nearest paved road and easily a 2-hour drive from anything like a grocery store. The kind of place where people raise chickens, patch their own roofs, and don't lock their doors, because if something wants in, it'll get in anyway. There were a few marked trails that branched off from the cabin. One looped around a ridge where wild blueberries grew, and another followed a stream bed for almost a mile before cutting through a field. Daniel always pointed me toward those, never the other one. The third trail started just past the back fence, barely visible at first glance. It curved down into a dense patch of pine and brush. A red cloth was tied around a skinny tree at the entrance, sun-bleached and weathered, but still hanging. I noticed it the first day I got there, and of course, being 14 and nosy, I asked about it. Daniel stiffened for just a second. It was quick, but it registered. "That one's not for walking," he said. "Old deer trail, steep, too much deadfall, lots of snakes." Then he clapped a hand on my shoulder and asked if I wanted to help split kindling. Like he couldn't steer the topic away fast enough. They didn't have a TV. No Wi-Fi either, which meant the days were long and filled with chores. Feeding chickens, hauling water, digging up weeds. At night, it got quiet in a way I wasn't used to. Not peaceful, just still. Too still. The cabin was old. It creaked constantly, even when no one moved. Doors shifted slightly in their frames. The floorboards had a way of responding to your steps a second after you'd taken them. I kept telling myself it was just the house settling, but around the third night, I started dreaming of her. She sat on the porch in a wooden chair that rocked ever so gently, even though I never saw her move it. She had silver gray hair braided down her back, and she wore a faded green dress that looked like it had belonged to someone 2 generations ago. She called herself Eliza, said it like I ought to know her already, and she asked me questions that were too specific. How I was sleeping, if I missed my mom, what I thought about the way the woods changed color depending on the time of day. She had eyes the same washed out blue as mine, not similar, identical. And even though I knew I'd never seen her before, there was something about her that felt inherited. Like an old song stuck in your head from a dream you didn't mean to remember. She never did anything threatening. She didn't lure me or scare me. She just sat there, calm as anything, shelling beans into a wooden bowl. But the dreams never faded when I woke up. I could recite every word she said, every movement, even the creak of the chair or the way the porch light hit her hands. On the 4th night, she stood up. "You're old enough now," she said. I remember her hands brushing against her dress as she turned toward the steps. "Come walk with me." In the dream, I followed her off the porch and into the woods. The trail we took was narrow, almost overgrown, but it didn't slow her down. I kept expecting her to turn around to check if I was still there, but she just kept walking at a steady pace. Her dress barely moved. We reached a rusted iron gate. It leaned sideways, wrapped in vines, half swallowed by the dirt like it had been there longer than anything else. Beyond it was a square patch of land. I couldn't see it clearly, but I felt the wrongness of it settle in my chest. Eliza turned to me. "I can't see you anymore," she said. It didn't make sense. I asked her why. "It's time for me to go, but you'll remember the way now." Then she stepped forward and hugged me. Her arms were cold, not like ice, but like water from a creek in early spring, cold that stuck to your skin and sank deep. My whole body locked up. When I woke up, my sheets were damp with sweat, and the house was dead silent. I went out later that morning just to see if the cloth was still tied to the tree. It wasn't. Not fallen or torn or hanging loose. Just gone. Like it had never been there. Marcy was sitting on the porch doing her crossword. Daniel was down by the tool shed. I grabbed my boots, didn't say anything, and slid quietly into the trees. The trail was still there, narrow, tangled. It dropped fast and forced me to duck under branches that grabbed at my shirt. The deeper I went, the quieter everything got. I passed a broken wall made of old stone, then a pile of rusted metal and shattered glass, half sunk into the mud. I wasn't sure how far I'd gone when I saw it. A fence, mostly fallen, bent and rust-stained. Inside was a small clearing that looked too even, too square to be natural. Stones poked up at angles, like broken teeth. No names, just worn rock. Some barely stuck out of the dirt. There was the gate, same as in the dream. One of the stones had a mason jar beside it. A scrap of yellow cloth was folded neatly inside. I leaned in close, but didn't touch it, and that's when I heard her. You came, after all. I turned around fast. She was standing under the trees. Same green dress, same braid. Her arms were crossed, and her eyes looked exactly like they did in the dream. You're not supposed to be here, I said. She didn't look angry, just steady. You were the one who walked down, she said. I thought you had to go. I did, she replied. But you didn't. She looked up toward the ridge behind me. Go that way. Don't look back. And if you hear me again, don't follow. Then she stepped behind a tree and vanished. I didn't think, I just ran. Got snagged on something once, maybe twice. I couldn't tell which direction I was going. I don't even remember reaching the edge of the woods. But eventually, I saw the clearing again. And the cabin. Daniel was outside. His face was pale. He looked like he'd been crying or sick or both. Where the hell have you been? He snapped. I couldn't get words out. My mouth worked, but no sound came. You've been gone 2 days. I stopped cold. No. I just went out this morning. Marcy came out onto the porch. Her hand flew to her chest the second she saw me, like her heart had just restarted. That night, after things calmed down, I waited until I heard Daniel get up for a glass of water. I followed him into the kitchen. Who was Eliza? He froze in place. Where'd you hear that name? He asked, his voice low and rough. She told me. He pulled out a chair, sat down like his legs wouldn't hold him up anymore. My mother had a sister, Eliza. She wasn't right in the head, heard voices, saw things. She was gentle but strange. One day, she just disappeared. Walked off into the woods. We never found her. Did she live in this cabin? I asked. He nodded. Born in it. Never left it. Not until that day. I didn't tell him about the grave markers, or the jar, or how the trail didn't always seem to point in the same direction twice. But I asked one more thing. That red cloth on the tree. Who tied it? He didn't look at me, just stared at the table. We marked the trail she walked down so nobody else would. I didn't sleep at all that night.